My name is Hunter Townsend, and at 34 years old, I sat in a courtroom while my own mother stood up and asked a judge to strip me of the right to run my own life. She wore navy that morning, the color she saved for funerals and photographs. Her lawyer had a soft voice and a folder thick enough to bury a woman in. Across the aisle, my sister refused to meet my eyes. My mother was already dabbing at tears that were not there. She believed she had won before I ever stood up. What she did not know, what none of them knew, was that 11 days earlier I had stopped being the grieving widow they thought they had buried alongside my husband. What I was about to hand that judge would take under a minute to read, and it would end everything my family had spent 3 weeks building in the dark. My mother asked a judge to declare me unfit. She should have asked herself why her softest daughter was smiling. If a family that smiled at your grief while counting your money has ever left you speechless, you are among friends here. Stay with me, because what happened in that courtroom is only the ending. The real story begins 3 weeks earlier at a back door I never walked through. The afternoon of Daniel's funeral, I drove across town to my parents' house with a copy of the will on the passenger seat and grief sitting where my ribs used to be. I wanted to tell them together. I wanted to say the words out loud to family and let them hold some of the weight. Daniel had left me everything he built with his own 2 hands. 3 apartments in the little brick triplex on Sycamore Street and a cottage on the Lake Erie shore where we spent every anniversary. I still had the funeral program folded in my coat pocket. The back door stuck the way it always had, so I pushed it half open with my shoulder and stopped because I heard my mother's voice, and she was not grieving. She was planning. "The lake place is perfect for Beth's kids," she said, like she was assigning seats at a wedding. My sister answered quick and hungry, and I heard my own name pass between them the way you pass a plate. They already knew. Before I had said a single word, before the flowers on Daniel's grave had wilted, they knew exactly what he had left me, and they were dividing it. I stood there with my hand still on the door, the will heavy in the car, and I understood I was not walking into a family. I was walking into a negotiation, and I was the thing being negotiated. Then my mother set the sentence I would carry for 3 weeks. She will sign whatever we put in front of her. She always folds. My phone buzzed hard against my hip, loud in the quiet, and I stepped back off the porch before either of them could turn around. I did not go in. That is the first thing people ask when I tell this, so I will answer it now. I did not throw open the door and scream. I did not cry on the steps. I have spent 9 years as a hospice nurse, and the job teaches you one strange skill above all others. When everything is falling apart in a room, you lower your voice. You get very calm and very quiet, because the calm is the only useful thing you have left to give. So I got quiet. I walked back to my car, set my hands on the wheel, and drove the long way home to the house Daniel and I had shared on the other side of Ashland. 20 minutes of county road, dead corn on both sides, and me not feeling much of anything yet. I did not decide to fight in that car. I was not that clear. What I decided was smaller and colder. I decided that I would not tell them what I had heard. Whatever they were building it in the belief that I did not know it existed. That belief was the only thing I owned that they could not see. So I would keep it. I would smile at the reception, accept the casseroles, hug the aunts, and let my mother believe her softest daughter was exactly as soft as she needed her to be. It felt like lying. It also felt for the first time in a week like standing on ground that did not move. By the time I pulled into my own driveway, my hands had stopped shaking. I did not yet know what they were really after. I only knew I would not hand it to them. Let me tell you who we were, because it matters. I grew up the quiet one. The middle child who paid her own way through nursing school, pulling night shifts at a nursing home in Mansfield. My sister Beth is 4 years older, louder, always halfway into a plan that needed just a little more money to work. Our mother Coral has a gift I have watched my whole life. She can make her wanting sound like worry. She can make taking sound like love. Daniel saw it before I did. Daniel was 41 when he died, a man who built things. He bought the Sycamore triplex as a wreck and spent 6 years fixing it unit by unit most weekends. His knuckles always scraped. The cottage he half built himself, a stubborn little place with a tin roof and a dock that leaned. We were not rich, we were careful, and we were his. At the funeral, my family performed their grief beautifully. My mother wept at the front pew. Beth held my hand at the graveside, gripped it hard, and leaned in close to whisper what I thought was comfort. "That lake house belongs to this family," she said into my ear, warm as anything. "Not to her." I thought I had misheard. I thought grief had bent the words. Her mascara was perfect. Her eyes were dry. I filed it away with 100 other small strange things from that week and told myself, people say clumsy things when they are sad. I know better now. She was not sad, she was rehearsing. And standing at my husband's grave, my sister had just told me plain as scripture exactly how the next 3 weeks were going to go. I just had not learned yet to hear it. People hear 3 apartments and a beachfront house and they picture money. They picture a woman who got lucky. So let me tell you what those things actually were. Because if you do not understand that, you will not understand any of it. The triplex was our retirement. Daniel and I never had children. We tried and it did not come, and somewhere in our 30s we made peace with it and poured that love into work instead. The 3 units on Sycamore paid a little more than their own mortgage every month. That margin was the plan. That margin was me, not dying alone and broke in a county home like half my patients. Daniel used to sit at the kitchen table on Sunday nights with a legal pad and map it out. Unit by unit, year by year. "You are going to be safe," he would say, tapping the pad. "I do not care what else happens. You are going to be safe." The cottage was different. The cottage was where he asked me to scatter him. He told me that in the hospital in a whisper, holding my hand with the little strength he had left. Not a graveyard. The dock. The water he taught me to swim in. So when I stood outside my mother's door and heard her hand that placed to my sister's children like a spare key, something in me that had been numb for a week woke up. This was not money they were dividing. It was the last promise my husband ever made me and the last request he ever made of me, and they were splitting it over coffee before the casseroles were cold. I remember one more thing from that Sunday table months back. Daniel quiet, not looking up from the pad. "Whatever happens, do not let your mother's name touch any of this paper." She came to my house the next morning before I had even washed the funeral out of my hair. Coral has a way of arriving that feels like weather. She was on my porch with a foil-covered dish, and that face she makes, the tender one, the one that has talked me out of my own opinion since I was 6. "Oh honey," she said, stepping past me into my kitchen. "Look at you. You are not sleeping." She set the dish down and took both my hands. "You cannot carry all of this alone. The properties, the taxes, Daniel's accounts. Your head is not in a place to be making decisions right now, and that is nothing to be ashamed of." A day earlier that speech might have worked. It was a good speech. She has had years to write it. But I had stood outside her kitchen and heard the other version, the one she says when she thinks I am not there, and now I could hear both at once, like a song played over its own echo. "Let me help you manage things," she said. "Just for a little while until you are yourself again." She reached into her bag and set a small stack of papers on my counter face down, unhurried, the way you would set down something you did not want looked at too closely. "Nothing to do today. Read them when you are up to it." Then she kissed my forehead and left. And I stood in my own kitchen with her casserole cooling and her papers face down and my heart going hard. I did not turn them over right away. I want you to know that, for one full day, I let them sit there, because part of me still wanted my mother to be my mother. When I finally flipped the top page, the numbness cracked straight down the middle. It was a power of attorney. Not a form for one errand. Not a note to let her sit on hold with the gas company. A durable financial power of attorney, broad as a barn door, that would let my mother act for me on money, property, and accounts. And the more I looked at it, the more the last 2 weeks rearranged themselves in my mind, the way a room does when the light finally comes on. Beth had come to the house during Daniel's final weeks. She had shown up with soup and dry eyes and offered to sit with him so you can sleep. And I had been so tired, so grateful that I let her. I remembered her in his little office off the bedroom more than once. The door half shut. I had thought she was giving me privacy. I understood now that she had been alone with his files. The will, the deeds, the account numbers, the whole map of everything Daniel spent his life building. She had not come to help him die. She had come to read. That was how they knew before I said a word exactly what was mine. My sister had walked into my dying husband's office and photographed my future. I sat down on my kitchen floor, with my back against the cabinets, the power of attorney in my hand, and did the math on my own family. It was not a hard equation. The papers were step 2, Beth's soup had been step 1. And whatever step 3 was, my mother had already assumed I would sign my way straight into it, because I always fold. I did not cry. I looked at that broad patient document, and I thought about the word Daniel used at the kitchen table. Paper. Do not let her name touch the paper. Here is the part I am least proud of, and the part you need most. Because there was already a power of attorney. I had already signed one. 3 weeks before Daniel died, in the worst stretch of it, when he needed morphine on a schedule and I could not leave his side for more than an hour, my mother had put a paper in front of me. A narrow one, she said, just so she could pay the hospice invoices and keep the utilities on while I was buried in caregiving. I was not stupid about it, whatever it looks like from the outside. I read it standing in the hallway. I asked her straight out. This is only for the bills, right? I said I wanted it limited. I remember saying it. And she looked at me with Daniel groaning through the wall and said, Honey, if I cannot move money for you, the hospice stops coming Friday. Do you want to argue wording, or do you want them here? Friday. So I signed. You would have signed. With your husband dying 8 feet away and a woman you trusted swearing it was only so the nurses kept coming. You would have signed too and told yourself you would sort out the details when there was air to breathe. There is never air to breathe. That is the whole trick of it. And here is the thing about a power of attorney that I did not know then and that cost me everything to learn. Signing one takes 30 seconds. Undoing one and undoing what has already been done with it takes lawyers and time and a fight. I had handed my exhausted signature to the one-person patient, enough to wait for the exact right moment to use it. I just did not yet know she already had, so I did not sign the new one. That was the first move, and it was mostly instinct. I called my mother and told her in my softest, most tired voice that I could not think about paperwork yet, that I just needed a couple of weeks. She said, "Of course, honey. No rush." In the voice of a woman who believes she has all the time in the world. Then I hung up and I stopped being tired. I went into Daniel's office, the same room my sister had photographed, and I started reading everything for myself. Bank statements, the deeds, the mortgage on the triplex. Daniel had kept it all in labeled folders because Daniel kept everything the way he built everything. Square and level and ready to be checked. And that is where I found the first thing that did not fit. A statement for a home equity line of credit tied to the Sycamore property. A credit line I had never opened. A credit line I had never heard him mention. The balance was not zero. My stomach did something slow and awful. I told myself there was an explanation. That Daniel had set it up for repairs. That I would find the paperwork in the next folder. I did not find it in the next folder. I sat there under the lamp he read by, surrounded by the neat square evidence of a careful man holding a piece of paper that said someone had been borrowing against the roof over my future. I did not know yet who. I did not let myself guess because the guess was too ugly to say alone in a dead man's office at night. But I wrote the account number on my hand in pen the way you hold on to a thing you are afraid will disappear. And I turned off the lamp. The phone calls started that week, and they came from 2 directions. Beth called me every day, sometimes twice. She was warm and busy and full of concern that always curved by the end toward the same place. You have so much on your plate now, Hunt. You should not have to think about tenants and taxes. Let the family take some of it. Let us manage the properties for you. Just till you are back on your feet. She never said give. She said manage. She said for you. My mother's calls were quieter and worse. I only learned about them because other people told me. My friend Dana from the hospice unit called, careful, kind, and a little confused. Your mom rang me. She said she was asking how you were holding up, whether you seemed clear, whether the grief was making you confused about things. My old neighbor said the same. So did a woman from my church. My mother was going person to person through my life, gently, sympathetically, planting one small seed in each conversation. Not Hunter is grieving. Something more specific than that. Whether Hunter is still all there. Whether Hunter can be trusted with decisions. I sat with the phone in my hand after Dana hung up, and felt the shape of it start to form, though I could not name it yet. My mother was not spreading gossip. Gossip is aimless. This had a direction. She was building something out of other people's memories of my worst 2 weeks, collecting sad little quotes, like a woman gathering kindling. I did not know yet what fire she meant to light with them. But you do not gather that much kindling to keep yourself warm. You gather it to burn something down. It was Dana who said the word out loud, though she did not mean to. We met for coffee and she stirred hers a long time before she told me the rest. I did not want to say this on the phone, she said. But your mom asked me something odd. She asked what the process was. If a person could not manage their own affairs anymore, who you would talk to, what it takes. I set my cup down very carefully. In my work, I have sat with families through exactly that question. The hard one. When a parent slips past the point of deciding for themselves, and someone has to step in legally and decide for them. There is a name for the thing you file. There is a courtroom and a judge and a doctor's letter. And at the end of it, a person can lose the right to sign their own name, spend their own money, choose their own life. My mother had been asking all over town how to take that from me, not to help me, to run me. And suddenly, every piece snapped into a single line. The soft POA on my counter was not the plan. It was insurance. The real plan was to gather enough worried neighbors and a sympathetic story to walk into a courtroom and have a judge agree that the poor grieving widow could not be trusted with her own husband's estate, and that her loving mother had better hold the reins. If it worked, she would not need my signature on anything ever again. She would have the judges. I thanked Dana. I drove home the long way. And somewhere on that county road, I stopped being frightened and started being something steadier and colder, because now I knew the shape of the thing. And a thing with a shape can be fought. I needed to breathe. So I drove up to the cottage. It is 2 hours north to the lake, and I made the drive on a gray Tuesday with the heat on and the radio off. I told myself I was going to sit on the dock and talk to Daniel the way you do when someone is fresh gone and still feels like they are just in the other room. I did sit on the dock. The water was the flat pewter it gets before winter. I told him what his family was doing. I told him I was scared and that I was not going to let them. And then walking back up to the cottage, our neighbor Frank Ellison came across the grass in his barn coat and lifted a hand and said the thing that turned the day. Hey Hunter. Real sorry about Daniel. Say that contractor fella your sister's husband. He get everything he needed the other day. Saw him and another guy out here with tape measures walking the lot. I kept my face still. I have a lot of practice keeping my face still. Oh, I said. Right, thanks Frank. But my heart was going. Greg. Greg had been at my cottage, my husband's cottage, the place his ashes were supposed to go. Walking the property with a tape measure and a stranger while I was 2 hours south burying him. I thanked Frank again and let myself into the cottage, and the smell of it, lake damp and cedar, nearly took my knees. They had not waited for a signature. They had not waited for a judge. In their heads, it was already theirs. Already a project. Already sold in some future they were confident enough to measure for. And confidence like that leaves marks. I started looking around the little house for what else they had touched. I found it at the side door. The lock was new. Bright brass where the old one had been dull. A different brand. Screwed in by someone in a hurry. My keys still worked the front, but this one, the private one, the door off the kitchen that Daniel and I used 100 times a summer, had been changed by a hand that was not mine. I stood there, turning my old useless key over in my palm and feeling something I did not have a clean word for. Violated maybe, in my own house. And on the kitchen table, like they had not even bothered to hide it, was the rest. A folding rule, a fan of paint chips. The flat gray blues people use to flip a place fast for people who have never loved it. And a yellow legal pad. Greg's blocky writing across the top of the first page. Flip potential. Comps. List spring. Under it numbers. What he thought the cottage would bring at auction. What he thought Daniel's dock and Daniel's tin roof and the water Daniel wanted to become part of were worth to a stranger in May. I did not tear it up. I want you to notice that, because the old me would have torn it up, cried and told no one. Instead, I took out my phone and I photographed it. Every page. The way my sister had photographed my husband's files. Except I was documenting a crime against my own property and she had been shopping. Then I put the pad back exactly where it had been, angled the same way, so that when they came back, they would not know I had seen. My mother thought her softest daughter would fold. Her softest daughter stood in a cottage with a changed lock and started very quietly to build a case. Driving back south in the dark, I kept hearing Daniel's voice. Do not let her name touch the paper. He had said versions of it more than once in the last year, and I had taken it for a sick man's worry the way the dying circle back to old grudges. I saw it differently now. He had known. Not the details, maybe, but the shape of his own in-laws, the exact direction their love turned when money was on the table, and there was a name that came with it. One he had said to me twice, tapping the arm of the hospital chair. Marion. If anything ever gets complicated, you call Marion. I had thought it was the morphine. Marion Delgado, it turned out, was the estate attorney who had drawn up his will. A woman he had used for years and never once mentioned to my family. Because Daniel, it was becoming clear, told my family nothing he did not have to. Home in his office again, past midnight, I went through the deepest drawer of his desk. The one that stuck. Looking for her card. I did not find a card. I found something better and worse. A plain white envelope sealed with my name on the front in Daniel's careful square hand. Just Hunter. He had left me a letter and hidden it where only someone who really looked would find it. And I sat holding it under his lamp, terrified of it. Because a letter from your dead husband is a door you can only open once. Let me stop here a moment. If you have ever had family smile at your grief while measuring your house behind your back, you already know the particular cold of that discovery. Tell me in the comments, did you stay quiet like I did, or did you speak? And if this is pulling you in, subscribe. Because the letter changes everything. I almost opened it that night. My thumb was under the flap, but I was exhausted and raw, and I knew myself well enough to know that whatever Daniel had written, I wanted to read it clear-eyed. Not at 1 a.m. with my hands shaking. So I set it on the desk, propped against the lamp, where I would see it first thing, and I made myself go to bed. I did not sleep much. In the morning, before I had touched the envelope, my phone rang, and it was my mother. And her voice had that bright managed warmth she uses when a plan is moving. Hunter, honey, good news. The family is going to get together Sunday. I thought we would do it up at the lake house. Get everyone out of the house and into some fresh air. Beth and Greg, the kids, your father. It would do us all good to be together after everything. At the lake house. My lake house. With its changed lock and its legal pad. The place they had already measured and mentally sold. She wanted to host her family's future on the grave of my husband's last wish. And she wanted me there, smiling so it would look like my idea. That sounds nice, Mom, I said. My voice did not shake. I am proud of that. I will bring something. She said, perfect, sweetheart, and hung up. Pleased. I set the phone down next to Daniel's letter and understood that Sunday was not a gathering. It was a stage. One had my name on it. To put in front of me, they meant to put it there. In that house. Surrounded by the props of family where saying no would feel like breaking something sacred. Which meant I had until Sunday to find out exactly what I was walking into. And it started with the envelope. I opened it at the kitchen table in the morning light because that was where Daniel did his best thinking, and it felt right to read him there. His handwriting filled 2 pages, and it was steady near the top and less steady near the bottom, and I could see the day getting harder for him in the slope of his own letters. I will not give you all of it. Some of it is only mine. But he wrote about the properties, and he wrote about my family, and he was not gentle. I have watched your mother my whole marriage to you, he wrote. I know how she works. The day I am gone, she will circle this and she will use how good you are against you. She will make you feel selfish for keeping what I built for you. My eyes were burning. And then the part I have read so many times, the paper is soft at the fold. So here is what I need you to promise me, love. If they ever put a paper in front of you, do not sign it. Not one line. Call Marion first. Her number is in the tin in the pantry behind the flour. I set all of this up so that no one can take it from you but you. I made it strong. But paper only holds if you hold the pen. Do not let them borrow your hand. Do not let them borrow your hand. He had known. Down to the gesture. He had known about the soft voice and the paper set face down on the counter. Had known it a year before it happened. And he had spent some of his last clear strength trying to arm me for it. I found the tin behind the flower. Marian Delgado's card was inside exactly where he said, along with a second key to the cottage and a folded page of account numbers in his hand. He had not left me helpless and hoping. He had left me a map, but a map is not a rescue. It only tells you where to walk. The walking, all of it, was still going to be mine. I could have called Marian that morning and let it all pour out. I did not. I sat with Daniel's letter and made myself think like the careful man who wrote it. And I saw that I had one advantage, and exactly one. They did not know that I knew. Every move they had made rested on the belief that I was the soft, grieving, unaware center of their plan. A woman who would arrive Sunday, get handed a paper, and sign it because saying no to her family in her own kitchen was harder than signing. If I called Marian and started filing things and changing locks in a fury, they would feel the ground shift. My mother is not stupid. The moment she sensed I was fighting, she would move faster. And the ugliest version of her plan, the courtroom, would come sooner and harder. So I made a decision that cost me something. I decided to keep smiling. I decided to go to the lake on Sunday and let them believe they were winning. To listen. To learn exactly what paper they meant to hand me and exactly what story they were telling, and to give nothing away. And then quietly on my own clock, I would do the real work with Marian where they could not see it. It felt like swallowing glass. Honestly, everything in me wanted to call my mother and let her hear that I knew. But I had watched too many families at too many bedsides to confuse the satisfaction of saying a true thing with the result of actually protecting yourself. One is a feeling, the other is a plan. I chose the plan. I made a list that night on Daniel's legal pad in my own hand this time. Call Marian Monday. Ask about the credit line. Ask what could already have been done and how fast I could stop the rest. Then I got dressed for Sunday and practiced my kind, tired face in the mirror. Sunday was beautiful, which felt like an insult. They had beaten me to the cottage. When I pulled in, Greg's truck was already there and smoke was coming off the grill Daniel built from a barrel, and the kids Emma and Sam were throwing rocks off the leaning dock. My mother had brought tablecloths. Tablecloths, to my grief. To my house. Inside on the same kitchen table where Greg's legal pad had been there, was now a folder. And partway through the afternoon, after the burgers, after the small talk, my mother slid it toward me with the tenderest smile in her arsenal. We had someone draw this up, she said. Just something to make things simple while you get back on your feet. A family agreement. It puts the properties into a kind of shared arrangement so nobody has to carry it all alone. You especially. Beth was watching me the way a cat watches a door. Greg had stopped chewing. I opened the folder and looked at it, and it was exactly what you would guess, dressed in soft words. An instrument that would fold my 3 properties into a family trust that they controlled, and I did not. I looked up and I kept my voice mild. This is thoughtful, I said. Let me read it properly before I sign anything. Daniel always said never sign at the table. I closed the folder. For 1 second, my mother's smile flickered just at the corner before she smoothed it back. Of course, honey. No rush. And then Greg, who is not smart, filled the silence. We already started pulling the cottage together, so once the paperwork is. And Beth said his name sharp and low, and he shut his mouth. But it was too late. He had said we already started. And every adult at that table heard the crack it made. My father found me on the porch afterward while the others cleaned up loudly enough to have an alibi. Raymond Merrick is 76, and his heart is failing, and he has spent 40 years letting my mother do the talking. He lowered himself into the chair beside me with the careful slowness of a man whose body has become a negotiation. For a while he just looked at the water. Then he said, not to me exactly, your mother says this fixes everything. The bills and all. His hands were shaking in his lap. You know I have got the heart thing. The treatments. It is a lot of money, Hunter. And for one moment, I saw it. The real thing under all of it. An old, scared man who had been told by the only voice he trusts that his daughter's inheritance was the answer to his fear. I felt sorry for him. I still do. But then he said the next thing quietly, looking at his hands, and it stopped my breath. Your mother already took care of some of it. The bank part. She said it was handled. The bank part. Handled. I kept my face turned toward the lake so he would not see it change. That was good of her, I said. He nodded, relieved. An old man glad a hard conversation was going smoothly. He did not know he had just handed me the corner of the whole thing. My mother had already done something at a bank. Something with money that was not hers. Using a hand that was not hers. And she had told my dying father it was handled so he would stop being afraid. The credit line. The account number written on my palm in the dart. Whatever guess I had refused to say out loud in Daniel's office, my own father had just confirmed the edge of it. I patted his knee. I went to find my purse. And Monday morning I called Marian Delgado. But before Marian could call me back, the mail did the talking. Tuesday. A thick envelope from the county probate court. My name in a window. I opened it standing at the mailbox in the cold, and the words swam and then held still. Petition for emergency appointment of a conservator. Filed by Coral Merrick. In the matter of Hunter Townsend, an adult alleged to be unable to manage her own affairs, there was a hearing date. 24 days after I buried my husband, my mother had gone to a courthouse and asked a judge to take my life away from me and hand it to her. And she had done it fast, under the emergency provision, which meant she wanted it decided before I was steady enough to fight. I read it twice at the mailbox. Then I went inside and read it a third time at the table. And I noticed my own hands were not shaking. And that told me something about how far I had already come from the woman on the porch 3 weeks ago. Every soft phone call to every neighbor made sense now. Every "is she clear? Is she confused?" She had been building a witness list. The kindling had a fire. And here is the thing she had gotten exactly wrong. The thing that would undo her, though I did not fully see it yet. She thought the petition would find me broken. She thought I would open it and collapse. Call her crying, ask her what to do, and prove every word of it true. Instead, it found me at a kitchen table with my husband's letter in a drawer and an estate lawyer's card in my pocket and an account number still faintly inked on my hand. The clock was now real. 24 days, 11 of them left. She had just told me exactly when and where this ended. All I had to do was decide what she would find waiting for her there. Marian Delgado had a low, unhurried voice and a way of asking questions that made you feel like the ground was being tested before you stepped on it. I told her everything in order. The overheard kitchen. The soft POA. The changed lock. The legal pad. My father's slip about the bank. And finally the petition. She was quiet a moment. Then she said, "Daniel told me a year ago this might happen. He set the estate up carefully for exactly this reason. You are in a far stronger position than your mother thinks. But we have to move, and we have to move in the right order." She laid it out plainly. First, revoke the old power of attorney in writing properly served so my mother's authority to act for me ended cold. Second, move the properties out of my sole name and into an irrevocable trust that Daniel's plan already allowed for, so there would be nothing loose for a conservator to seize, even if the petition somehow flew. Third, build the answer to the petition itself. The proof that I was exactly as capable as I had always been. And one more thing, Marian said. You said your father mentioned a bank. I want you to pull every statement on that credit line. If she used the old power of attorney to borrow against your property, that is not a family squabble anymore. That is financial exploitation. And it changes who the judge is worried about in that room. I sat with the phone against my ear and felt something I had not felt since the funeral. Not hope exactly. Traction. For 3 weeks, I had been reacting. One step behind a woman who had planned this at my husband's deathbed. Now I had a lawyer, an order of operations, and 11 days. Where do we start? I said. Marian said we start today. Come in this afternoon and bring the letter. That afternoon in Marian's office, I signed the papers that turned everything. I revoked the power of attorney and Marian arranged for it to be formally served on my mother so there would be a record. A date. A moment after which Coral Merrick had no more authority over my affairs than a stranger on the street. Then I signed the documents funding the trust and the 3 properties, the triplex, the cottage, all of it passed out of my sole name into an instrument no conservator could touch, its terms set by Daniel a year before he died. It took an afternoon. When I walked back out to my car, the sky looked scrubbed and enormous, and I understood that the fight was in a legal sense already over. My mother just did not know it yet. And this is the part I need you to sit with, because it is where the whole thing turns. For the next 10 days, my family kept planning. Beth kept calling to ask when I would sign the family agreement. My mother kept collecting her worried neighbors. Greg kept measuring the cottage. They were arranging furniture in a house that no longer belonged to anyone they could push around. And they had no idea. Every warm, managing phone call from my sister was a woman bailing a boat that was already on dry land. I would hang up and hear my mother's sentence in my head, the one from the kitchen door. She always folds. And I would think very quietly, not this time, and go back to work with Marion. There is a specific kind of power in knowing something the person across from you does not. My whole life, my mother had held that power over me. For 11 days in the space between the petition and the hearing, I held it over her, and she smiled through every second of it, certain she was winning, right up until the room I had built for her. Keeping the mask on was the hardest work I have ever done, harder than the night shifts, harder than Daniel's last week, because now I had to look my family in the face and give them nothing. Beth came by my house that week with a coffee cake and her softest voice, and sat in my kitchen and told me how worried everyone was, how much easier things would be once the family arrangement was settled, how I really should not be making big decisions alone. She always folds. I thought watching her cut me a slice I did not want. She always folds. And I smiled and said I was thinking it over, and let her leave believing she had nudged me an inch closer. The worst moment was the children. As Beth was leaving, she called back to Emma, who is 11 and has Daniel's habit of chewing her lip when she is thinking, and said, "Come on, baby. We will be up at the lake house all summer. You can pick your room then." Pick your room. My mother had sold these kids a future in my husband's cottage, and they were innocent in it. And I had to stand in my doorway and smile at a little girl being handed something that was not theirs to give. I did not correct it. It was not Emma's crime. But I went inside afterward and pressed my back against the door and breathed until the anger went from hot to cold again, because cold was useful and hot was not. That was the discipline of those 10 days. Feel it, then set it down, then keep working. Marion had warned me the family would sense a shift if I changed too suddenly. Would move the hearing up, or worse. So I stayed exactly the daughter they expected. Soft, and slow, and folding. One had the table and my hands were busy with locks they could not see. A petition like my mother's does not just claim you are sad, it claims you cannot function. That grief has cracked your judgment past the point of running your own life. To beat it, I could not simply feel capable. I had to prove it on paper to a judge who had never met me. So I built the other side of the ledger. I called Pete Vance, the hospice social worker who had worked beside me through Daniel's illness and a dozen other patients before him. Pete had watched me chart medications to the milligram while my own husband was dying in the next room. She had seen me hold a family together at 3 in the morning and then go home and hold my own. When I told her what my mother had filed, she was quiet for a long moment, and then she said, "Send me the date. I will be there and I will tell that judge exactly who you are." Marion gathered the rest. My employment record. 9 unbroken years. My nursing license in good standing. The evaluations from my supervisor. The simple, boring paperwork of a competent life. None of it was dramatic, that was the point. My mother's case was built on feeling. On a chorus of worried voices remembering a woman at her most broken. Mine was built on the flat, unglamorous record of a woman who had kept showing up. I remember Marion tapping the stack of it on her desk and saying juries and judges, both they think they want a story. What actually moves them is a person who is clearly telling the truth while someone else is clearly performing. I did not have to perform. I just had to be in that room, the thing I had always been, and that my mother had bet money the judge would not see. Steady, the clock read 9 days. My mother, meanwhile, had stopped hiding her confidence. That is what certainty does to people like her. It makes them careless. She called me midweek and she was not even bothering with the worried voice anymore. She was brisk, proprietary, a manager checking on inventory. Now once things are settled, she said we will want to get the Sycamore units cleaned up. And you should start thinking about moving some of your things out of the lake house so Beth can get in there before the season. Get in there before the season. She was telling me out loud to start clearing out of my own cottage. As if the hearing were a formality already behind us. I gripped the counter and kept my voice mild and said something about not wanting to rush. And then she said it. The thing that told me she had no idea the ground had moved. Do not you worry about the money side, honey. The bank part is all handled. I took care of that weeks ago. The bank part. All handled. Weeks ago. There it was again. Said out loud. Unguarded. A woman so sure of winning that she was narrating her own crime to the daughter she was robbing. She had used the old power of attorney. The one I had signed at Daniel's bedside. To do something at a bank weeks before she even filed her petition. She had been borrowing against my property while my husband was still warm. I said, that was thoughtful of you, Mom. I actually said that. And I hung up and stood in my kitchen, shaking, not with fear now, but with a clean, cold fury. Because she had just confirmed on a phone call what I still needed to prove on paper. All I had to do was go get the paper, and I knew exactly which account, because the number was still faintly there, worn, but readable. On the side of my hand, Frank Allison called me 2 days later from the lake, and his voice was careful, the way country neighbors get when they are trying to tell you something is wrong without starting a war. Hunter, I do not want to butt in, he said, but there is work going on at your place. That contractor, your sister's husband, he had a crew here tearing out the back kitchen. And there is a lockbox on the front door now, the kind the realtors use. And well, he paused. Rosa found it listed online. For sale come spring. They have got photos up and everything. A lockbox. A listing. Photos of the inside of my husband's cottage staged for strangers, while the petition to declare me incompetent was still sitting on a judge's desk. Greg had started demolition on a house he did not own. Without a permit. Without a deed. On the strength of nothing but my family's certainty that it was as good as theirs. Frank said one more thing, quiet. Rosa printed the listing in case you want it. There is a quote on it. Says family lake retreat. Been in the family for years. Been in the family for years. I thought about Beth's mouth at the graveside. That lake house belongs to this family. Not to her. They had put the exact lie into a real estate ad. I thanked Frank and told him to hold on to that printout like it was money. Because it was. Then my phone lit up in my hand mid-thought. And it was Marian, and her voice had an edge I had not heard from her before. Hunter, she said. I pulled the bank records on that credit line. I need you to sit down. I found what your mother did with your husband's property. And I found exactly when she did it. If you are feeling that hot, quiet fury right now, hold on to it. Because what Marian found is the reason my mother never saw the courtroom coming. Comment the word quiet if you are still with me. And subscribe. Because the hearing is close now. I sat down at Daniel's desk, and Marian told me. Using the power of attorney I had signed 3 weeks before Daniel died, my mother had opened, or rather drawn against, a home equity line of credit secured by one of the Sycamore units, not a small figure, tens of thousands. She had done it in the window when I was never more than a room away from a dying man. When signing that narrow little paper had felt like the only way to keep the nurses coming. She had taken my exhaustion and turned it into a loan against my future, and she had done it before she ever filed to have me declared unable to manage that future. Marian walked me through what it meant. She is going to stand up in court and argue you cannot handle your own money, she said. And the record shows that while your husband was on his deathbed, she used your signature to borrow against your property without your knowledge. Judges do not love many things, Hunter. But they truly hate a fiduciary who robbed the person she claims to be protecting. The moment we put this in front of the court, the question in that room stops being whether you are competent. It becomes what your mother did with the power she was trusted to hold. I asked the question I was afraid of. Can we prove she did it and not me? Marion almost laughed. The bank has signature cards, dates, and an IP address. You were logged into a hospice charting system, 3 states of exhaustion, deep, on the days these transactions happened. Yes, we can prove it. I hung up and sat in the dark a while. I did not feel triumphant. She was still my mother. But somewhere under the grief, there was a floor now. Solid. And I stood up on it. 7 days. There was one thing I still wanted before the hearing, and it was not evidence. It was to hear my sister say it. Not for the court, for me. So I asked Beth to lunch. Sisters, just us. And I wore the soft face one more time. She came ready to close a deal. Warm and expansive. Sure, I was finally coming around. Over salads, she talked about the summer, the kids, the lake, how nice it would be once everything was simple. And I let her. And I asked small questions. And my sister, who has never in her life been able to resist explaining how clever she has been, told me more than she should have. Honestly, Mon handled most of it, she said, waving her fork. She said we had to get everything lined up quick before Daniel's lawyer got involved and made it complicated. You know how he was about all his little arrangements. Before Daniel's lawyer got involved. She said it. And did not even hear herself say it. She confirmed over a Cobb salad that they had raced to move on my property specifically to beat the estate attorney my husband had set up to protect me. Then she caught something in my face. Some stillness I did not smother fast enough. And she stopped. And for just a second, her eyes narrowed. You are being weird, she said. You okay? I put my soft face back on all the way on and said I was just tired. That the paperwork was a lot, that I would probably sign the family thing this week and be done with it. Her whole body relaxed. She squeezed my hand across the table. The same hand she had gripped at Daniel's grave. You are doing the right thing, she said. I paid for lunch. I have never in my life so badly wanted to say a true thing and so completely known that silence was worth more. 5 days. The last days before the hearing had the strange calm of a well-run code. Everyone moving. No one wasting emotion. Marion assembled the answer to the petition into something plain and devastating. The revocation of the power of attorney dated and served. The trust documents showing the properties were beyond any conservator's reach. My employment record, my license, my supervisor's letter, Pete's sworn statement. And sitting on top like a stone on a stack of papers, the bank record showing what my mother had borrowed against my property and when and with whose exhausted signature. Marion's plan was quiet and merciless. We would not tip any of it beforehand. We would let my mother walk into that courtroom with her chorus of worried neighbors and her navy dress and her certainty. Let her make her whole case that I was too broken to manage my affairs. Let her build it all the way to the top. And then we would simply calmly hand the judge the truth 1 page at a time and let it fall. Do not argue with her in there. Marion told me. Do not raise your voice. Do not defend yourself with feeling. She is going to be emotional, and if you stay quiet and factual while she performs the contrast, will do more than any speech you could give. It was the same thing the job had taught me. When the room is coming apart, lower your voice. I made only one request. I asked Marion if I could be the one to hand the judge the bank records. She looked at me a moment, then nodded. Yes, she said. You hold the pen. That is the whole point. I drove up to the cottage that evening, past Greg's lockbox and his torn-out kitchen, and I sat on the leaning dock in the cold and told Daniel we were ready. 2 days. The night before the hearing, I did not rehearse a speech because I was not going to give one. Instead, I laid my clothes out plain and dark. Nothing that looked like either a victim or a fight. I read Daniel's letter one more time at the kitchen table, the soft folded part. Do not let them borrow your hand. And I put it in my bag. Not as evidence. Just so he would be in the room. I thought about my mother across town laying out her navy dress. Certain. I thought about my father who would be there because she would make him come. An old scared man about to watch something he did not understand. I thought about Emma who'd been told to pick her room, and I thought about the woman I had been 3 weeks ago standing frozen outside a kitchen door, hearing that she always folds, believing somewhere underneath that it might be true. She was not gone, but she was not in charge anymore. I understood something sitting there that I want to leave with you before the courtroom, because it is the whole thing. My mother had spent my entire life mistaking my quiet for weakness. The softness, the patience, the way I lower my voice when everyone else is raising theirs. She read all of that as fooled. She never once considered that a woman who stays calm while she is being robbed might be calm because she is counting. Tomorrow she would stand up in a public room and tell a judge that her grieving daughter could not be trusted to run her own life. And her grieving daughter would stand up very quietly and hand that judge a single stack of paper. I turned off Daniel's lamp. I was not smiling yet. But I knew lying there in the dark exactly why I would be the moment the clerk called my name. The hearing was in a small courtroom on the third floor of the county building, the kind of room with bad light and good acoustics. My mother arrived in navy. My father on her arm, moving slow, Beth behind them, and 3 of the neighbors she had been calling for weeks. Her chorus, dressed for church. She had a lawyer with a soft voice and a thick folder, and when she caught my eye across the aisle, she gave me a look I will never forget. Tender and pitying. The look you give someone you are about to do a great kindness. She truly believed she was here to save me. When the judge called the matter, my mother's lawyer stood and told the story she had built. That I had lost my husband, suddenly and tragically. That the grief had left me unable to cope. Unable to manage the significant properties in my late husband's estate. That family members and neighbors had grown deeply concerned about my state of mind. That a temporary conservatorship with my devoted mother at the helm was the compassionate way to protect me from mistakes I was in no condition to avoid. Then he called his witnesses. And one by one, my neighbors stood and said true sad things about a woman at her lowest. A woman who had cried in her driveway, who had seemed lost, who had not been herself. Every word of it was accurate. Every word of it was 3 weeks old. I sat still and let it happen, hands folded exactly as Marian had told me. And I watched my mother dab her eyes at all the right moments, and I understood that she had built a real case out of real grief. And that if I were anyone else sitting anywhere else without the stack of paper in Marian's folder, it might even have worked. The judge turned to my side of the room. And the respondent, she said. Is she represented? Marian stood. She did not raise her voice. She said we were, that we thanked the court, and that before I said a word on my own behalf she wished to submit some documents relevant to the petitioner's fitness to serve as anyone's conservator. The judge said go ahead, and Marian walked 1 page to the clerk and began. Calm as still water. Your Honor, the petitioner asks to be given control of my client's finances on the grounds that my client cannot be trusted to manage them. We would first like the court to see how the petitioner managed my client's finances when she was already trusted to do so. She laid it out. That 3 weeks before Daniel Townsend died, while my client provided round-the-clock care for her dying husband, the petitioner presented her with a durable power of attorney represented as necessary only to pay hospice invoices. And that using that power of attorney, the petitioner had, without my client's knowledge, drawn a home equity line of credit against my client's property for tens of thousands of dollars, while the husband was still alive in the next room. I watched my mother's face as Marian said it. I had braced for the number, the theft, the sheer nerve of it. What I had not braced for was the date. Hearing it read aloud in a courtroom, the exact day she had done it. And remembering exactly where I had been standing that day, at Daniel's bedside, timing his morphine, trusting the woman in the other room to keep the lights on. That was the cut that went all the way down. Not that she stole. That she stole then, in that week, from that exhaustion, using the hand I gave her because I believed she was helping me keep my husband comfortable while he died. The chorus of neighbors had gone very quiet. My father was staring at my mother, and my mother's tender, pitying face had begun slowly to come apart. Marian did not stop to let it land. She just kept setting truth on the clerk's table, 1 page at a time, in a voice with no heat in it at all. She submitted the revocation of the power of attorney properly served, dated the week I first learned what my family was doing, so the court could see my mother had held no authority over my affairs for some time. She submitted the trust documents showing the 3 properties had passed out of my sole ownership entirely, so that even if the court appointed a conservator that afternoon, there was nothing loose for anyone to control. The petition seeks authority over an estate the respondent no longer personally holds, Marion said. It is respectfully aimed at property that is already protected. Then, she submitted the boring, unglamorous proof of who I actually was. 9 years of employment, an active nursing license, my supervisor's letter. And Pete Bance, who took the stand and told the judge, steady and plain, that she had watched me chart medication to the milligram and hold grieving families together at 3 in the morning, do the very weeks my mother now claimed I had lost my mind. And last, Marion slid across the printout Rosa Ellison had saved. The real estate listing for my cottage. Posted while this very petition was pending. The petitioner's family listed the respondent's lake property for sale, Marion said before this court had ruled on anything. The listing describes it as, and I quote, a family lake retreat, been in the family for years. That lake house belongs to this family, not to her. The words my sister had breathed into my ear at a graveside were now typed on an exhibit in a courtroom in her own husband's ad. And the judge read them slowly and then looked up over her glasses. Not at me. At my mother. And that was when Coral Merrick stopped performing grief and started to panic. My mother came up out of her chair before her lawyer could stop her. This is not what it looks like, she said too loud for the small room. I did all of this for her. Everything I did to protect her. She has never been able to take care of herself, Your Honor. Never. And now she has gotten some lawyer to twist a mother's love into a crime. Her lawyer put a hand on her arm. She shook it off. She turned to me and her face was wet now. But it was not grief. It was fury. The real face under the tender one. The one I had only ever heard through a kitchen door. After everything I have done for you, she said to me, shaking. You would do this to your own mother? In front of people. You ungrateful, cold little girl. The judge said ma'am once sharp. My mother did not hear it. She was still staring at me, waiting for me to crumble, because that is what I did. That is what I had always done. That is what she had told my sister I would do at the very start. She always folds. And I looked back at my mother, and I did not raise my voice. I want you to understand that. I could have. I had 3 weeks of it stored up. But the whole point, the entire point, was that I did not need to. So I stayed in my chair and I kept my hands folded and I said quietly enough that the room had to still itself to hear me. I am a hospice nurse. I have held steady hands through the worst nights people ever have. I think I can hold my own. My mother's mouth opened and nothing came out. And then I said the last thing. The thing I had carried since the kitchen door. And I said it gently, almost kindly. Which is what made it land. You told Beth I would sign whatever you put in front of me. That I always fold. I let it sit. You were right, Mama. I did not fold this time. I never folded. I just stopped telling you my plans. The room was so quiet I could hear the radiator tick. My mother sat down like her strings had been cut. And the judge, who had watched one woman scream and one woman whisper, turned to her clerk and asked how quickly the court could take up the question of the funds the petitioner had removed. The petition did not just fail. It turned over in the water and showed its belly. The judge denied the emergency conservatorship from the bench, plainly noting that the respondent had demonstrated more than sufficient capacity and that the petition appeared, in her words, to be aimed less at protecting me than at reaching property that had already been placed beyond reach. Then she went after the rest of it, and my family's whole future rearranged in about 10 minutes. Beth had sat through the bank records and the listing with her face draining. And when the judge referenced the real estate exhibit, she made the mistake of trying to explain, half rising to say they had only listed it to be ready, that they had always meant to share. It did not help her. Her own words at lunch came back on her now, in principle if not in transcript. The race to move before Daniel's lawyer got involved. And everyone in that room could see exactly what share had meant. And Greg had torn the kitchen out of a house he did not own without a permit, and listed a property with no legal claim to it. and Marion made sure the court understood that the demolition and the listing were not my problem to undo, but his liability to answer for, along with whatever the county had to say about unpermitted work on a lakefront lot. The flip that was going to make the money had become a debt with their name on it. I did not gloat. I sat very still and watched my sister understand in real time that the summer at the lake, the room Emma was going to pick, the clever plan that Mom had handled, all of it was gone, and that it was gone because they had reached for something that was never theirs and got caught with their hands inside it. She looked at me once, stunned, waiting for me to soften it. I did not. My mother's reckoning was quieter and in its way larger. Because she lost the two things she had spent her life protecting above all others, her money and her mask. The judge ordered the matter of the credit line referred for review as a possible breach of fiduciary duty and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, which is a heavy phrase to hear said about your own mother in a public room. In plain terms, she would have to answer for what she had taken, and she would have to pay it back. Every dollar she had borrowed against my property using my exhausted signature. But the money was not the real loss, and she knew it and I knew it. The real loss was the room. Her neighbors. The chorus she had so carefully gathered. Had come to that hearing believing they were helping a devoted mother rescue a broken daughter. And they had watched Liv the story turn inside out until they were sitting on the wrong side of it. They filed out afterward without meeting her eyes. The devoted mother performance she had run for decades on me, on my father, on the whole town, had been switched on in front of a judge and had failed in front of witnesses. And that was a thing she could never fully get back. She did not apologize. I want to be honest about that because you have been waiting maybe for the moment she breaks and means it. It did not come. In the hallway, she tried one more version of it. That I had humiliated her. That no daughter who loved her mother would do this. That I would regret it when she was gone. Blame, then self-pity, then a threat, wearing the costume of grief. The same 3 notes she had played my whole life. I listened to all of it, and then I said, I revoked your access to everything this morning, Mom. All of it. And I walked past her to find my father. My father was sitting alone on a bench in the hallway, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. An old man who had been brought to a courtroom to support a story that had just been exposed as a robbery. His hands were shaking in his lap the way they had on the porch. When he saw me, he tried to stand and could not quite manage it, and I sat down next to him instead. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then he said, not looking at me, I did not know about the bank. I want you to know that. She told me it was all handled and I did not ask. And I believed him, mostly, because believing him cost me little. And because a man that frightened rarely has the stomach to look closely at the thing keeping him afloat. He had let it happen by not asking. That is its own kind of failure, and I did not pretend it was not. But he was 76 and dying by inches, and he had been steered his whole life by a woman who steered everyone. And I found I did not have any cruelty in me for him. Your treatments, I said. The heart. How much is it really? He told me. Ashamed. And I told him I would take care of it, not through her, not $1 through her hands. I would pay the hospital directly, on my terms, and he would never have to ask my mother for it again. He started to cry, the loose, helpless crying of the very old, and he gripped my hand and I let him. That is not weakness. Letting an old man hold your hand after the woman he married led him into a courtroom to rob you. It is the opposite. I could afford to be kind because I had already made myself safe. Daniel taught me that. Get strong first. Then you get to be gentle. There was one more thing I had to get right, and it had nothing to do with courtrooms. Emma and Sam. My niece and nephew had spent weeks being told they were getting a lake house a summer. A room of their own by the water, and none of that was their doing. Children do not choose the schemes they are handed. If I let my anger at Beth and Greg roll downhill onto those kids, I would win the fight and lose the only part of the family still worth keeping. So, a few days after the hearing, when things had gone cold and quiet between me and my sister, I called Emma myself. She answered small and unsure. Old enough to know something had gone wrong. Not old enough to understand what. And I told her the truth. The child-sized version of it. That the lake house had belonged to her Uncle Daniel, and now it belonged to me. And that grown-ups had gotten into a fight about it that was not her fault, and not her business. And then I told her that the cottage would always be a place she could come. That if she wanted to swim off the dock in July, she was welcome as my guest. Invited by me any summer she liked. Not because anyone took it, because I wanted to share it. I heard her let out a breath she had probably been holding for weeks. Even Sam, she said. Even Sam, I told her. The difference between what my mother did and what I did fits in that sentence, if you want it. My mother handed those children something that was not hers to give, to buy their love and cover her theft. I offered them something that was mine freely, with no strings, because they were innocent, and I was not going to punish the innocent to punish the guilty. That is where the line is. I have never once been sorry I drew it there. The months after were quieter than you would think. My mother repaid what she had taken in installments through lawyers, and we have not spoken since except through them. Beth and Greg untangled themselves from the mess at the cottage slowly and expensively. The permits, the county, the torn-out kitchen Greg had to make, right at his own cost. The listing came down. I had the locks changed back, the real ones. And I kept the only keys. The triplex on Sycamore still pays a little more than its own mortgage every month the way Daniel planned it. And I am still going to be safe the way he promised me at the kitchen table with his legal pad. I paid for my father's treatments directly, and I visit him when my mother is out. He is thinner now. Softer around the eyes. He tells me thank you every time, as if he is afraid I might change my mind. I never will. He never really was the one who hurt me. In June, I finally did the thing I had been carrying since the hospital. I drove up to the cottage alone, and I took Daniel out to the end of the leaning dock, in the little tin his ashes came in. And I let the lake have him, the water he taught me to swim in, exactly where he asked. It was a bright, ordinary morning. A neighbor's dog barked somewhere. I did not fall apart. I stood on the dock he built, and I told him it was done. That no one had taken what he left me, that I had held the pen. And then I sat down, and I let myself cry for the first time since the funeral. Not the polite tears of a woman who has to keep it together for other people. The other kind. The kind that comes up from underneath a whole year of holding steady. I cried for Daniel. For the children we never had. For the mother I had wanted her whole life to be, and would never have. For the daughter I had been on that porch 3 weeks after his funeral, thinking maybe it really was true that she always folds. And when I was done, I washed my face in the lake, and I walked back up to the house that was still mine. Emma came up in July, and Sam. And they threw rocks off that same dock and shrieked in the cold water. And it was the first time the place had felt like ours again instead of evidence. I think that is the part my mother never understood. She thought the properties were the prize. They were never the prize. The prize was being a woman no one could move against. Standing on her own dock, in her own life, giving what she chose to give. There is one thing I want you to take from my story, and I need you to hear it before you close this out. Being gentle was never the same as being easy to take from. Being kind was never the same as being weak. Being quiet was never the same as being gone. And the day I stopped explaining that to people who already knew was the day they lost. Is somewhere in this you saw your own mother or your own sister, or your own hand shaking as you signed a paper you did not fully read at a bedside. You were too tired to leave. I need you to do something for me tonight. Not next week. Tonight. Find out who holds power of attorney over your life. Find out whose name is on your accounts. Read every line before you sign anything. A smiling relative slides across a table. Do not wait for a funeral to find out. Do not wait until a navy dress is already hanging in a closet somewhere, with your name written on it in a courthouse folder. And if this story reached something in you that has been quiet for a long time, do me one more kindness. Hit that like button, so someone else who is standing outside a kitchen door right now, hearing the words she always folds, finds this too. Subscribe so you are here for the next one, because there are more of these stories, more quiet women. More soft daughters, more people who were never as easy to take from as their families believed. And drop me a comment. Tell me the sentence you overheard. Tell me the paper you did not sign. Tell me the moment you stopped folding. I read them. Everyone. My name is Hunter Townsend. My mother asked a judge to declare me unfit. She should have asked herself why I was smiling. I will see you in the next story.